All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fanon, and in this video, we are going to talk about the 147 and 160 pound division, where Errol Spence Jr. and JERMALL Charlo have been blasted by a certain media member who is requesting that they be stripped of their titles. Let's talk about that in this video. All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fanon, and in this video, we're going to be in the 147 pound division and 160 pound division at the same time, where you have a major boxing journalist demanding that Errol Spence Jr. be stripped of his titles, as well as JERMALL Charlo, for what he calls holding up the careers of other fighters. This is, of course, Chris Mannix from Sports Illustrated, and also coincidentally DAZN. Now, before I get into that, though, let me welcome you back to the channel. If you are new to the channel, please accept my invitation to hit the subscribe button. And thank you to everybody that supports the longtime subscribers and supporters that have been with the channel from the beginning, people that have subscribed just recently. Thank you guys for all your support in the comments, by hitting the like button, sharing the videos, and also especially thank everybody that supports in the super thanks of videos like this. Really does go a very long way towards helping the channel continue to be able to do what we do. But let's get to this, man, because I think this is really interesting stuff. Because you know, I want to call it selective outrage, but it's really not selective outrage. However, it's interesting to me who a lot of these things are pointed at. Well, as you know, Errol Spence Jr. is the 147 pound champion for the WBC, the WBA, and the IBF. He has not fought since April of last year. So he's not fought in 12 months. It is rumored that he will be fighting Keith Thurman at 154 pounds. Which would satisfy a mandatory requirement for his 147 pound WBC title, right? Now, he also has another mandatory guy that is out there named Jaron Ennis for the IBF. And also the WBA, there was supposed to be a mandatory for him and Emmanuel Stanionis. However, Amanda Stanionis is now going to be fighting Virgil Ortiz. And I think that fight's going to be in April or May in Texas. And the winner of that, I believe, will then be the next mandatory for Errol Spence, right? Then also there's JERMALL Charlo, who is the WBC 160 pound champion, who has not fought. I do not believe he's fought in 2 years, something like that. But there's been a significant delay for in JERMALL Charlo defending his WBC title. So Chris Mannix is saying that these guys need to be stripped. Right now, for good measure, he also, now this is interesting, coming from DAZN, says also you need to strip Gennady Golovkin, who has not defended his title in a while, even though I don't really think it's been that long since he defended his WBA title. He unified titles with the WBA champion Murata. I don't think it was much over a year ago. Then he moved up to 168 to fight Gennady Golovkin. But the idea that you should strip these fighters for inactivity, I find to be a little bit funny in each one of these particular cases. First of all, in the case of Errol Spence Jr., Errol Spence Jr. will have fought in a year. Roughly a year after his last fight. That is not a ridiculously long amount of time not to fight, especially when if you're fighting on a yearly basis. You have the sanctioning bodies require for you to fight a mandatory every year. And if you do not on top of fighting your mandatory, you can fight a voluntary. Errol Spence Jr. was in a negotiation to fight Terrence Crawford, and it was an extended amount of time where he thought that he had a fight that could be made. The WBC is aware of it. The WBA is aware of it. The IBF is aware of it. The WBO was aware of it. And then Terrence Crawford backed out and didn't take the fight. So Errol Spence Jr. is now going to fight a mandatory. Now, for me, the fake outrage, right, of saying, well, if Errol Spence Jr. is going to defend his belt against Keith Thurman at 154 pounds and not 147, you need to strip him of his belt. What difference does that make? I mean, in any practical sense, it is if they fight at 154, because it's not known that they will or they won't, because the fight has not been announced yet. If he does fight at 154, and the WBC says, okay, well, we'll allow that to happen, and it will satisfy his mandatory, and the guy that is the mandatory is actually getting the fight, you're not holding up anybody's career by doing that. You're not holding up anybody's career at all by doing that. What you are doing is you're literally taking the same mandatory fight that you would have had, but you're fighting out of your weight class for it. And the only person that really misses out on anything is Keith Thurman, because if he would have won, then he'd be able to hold the other three. He'd be able to hold the other three belts, right? But in any practical sense, it really doesn't make any difference, because Errol Spence Jr. would still have fought the guy that was the mandatory. However, in the case of JERMALL Charlo, if you have a back injury and it is a certified injury, you should be able to recover from your back injury. However, I will say that in the case of Gennady Golovkin, I'm less concerned in all of these things. I'm less concerned about how often these guys fight, as long as they're fighting once a year. Now, I will agree that the JERMALL Charlo not fighting in 2 years that's a good amount. That's a good amount of time not to have fought. And there is, mechanisms where the WBC could have put him in recess or something like that. But to just strip him of the title because of an injury seems a little bit much to me. But at the same time, man, at least it's not a scenario where the WBC, and now to Chris Mannix's credit, I do believe that he was not a fan of the franchise rule that allowed Canelo Alvarez to keep his title but not fight a mandatory at all, which also is the case for every WBA champion that there is in boxing right now, with the exception of Errol Spence. So even when you're talking about people fighting for their mandatories, in the case of the WBA, technically speaking, Errol Spence shouldn't even have a mandatory, or every other WBA champion should have a mandatory for that belt. But at the end of the day, I understand the point with saying, getting these guys and hopefully these guys fighting more often. But if you take, for example, Terrence Crawford, and the fact that Terrence Crawford had a fight in December. Yeah, he had a fight in December, but he had a fight against David Avanesyan. What's the difference? And I mean that. Like, what's the difference between Terrence Crawford, JERMALL Charlo taking a year off and not fighting Selecki at all, and Terrence Crawford fighting a guy that doesn't really belong in the ring with him to begin with? I would say a slight favor for Terrence Crawford fighting a guy that really probably doesn't belong in the ring to begin with. But as far as holding these guys' careers back, Jaron Ennis most definitely deserves a shot at a championship. And I do believe, though, that he is fighting on the undercard of Gervonta Davis. Keith Thurman is actually getting the fight. And what is the other? The IBF, the WBA, and the IBF, the WBC, and the WBA. And the WBA, the Stanionis is not having his career held up because he's fighting Virgil Ortiz, and which should be a decent fight for him and a good money-making opportunity. But, at the end of the day, man, I really do agree that I wish that people would fight more often. Maybe the sanctioning bodies could make it 2 mandatories a year, something like that, so you could force people to fight more often. But, there's all kind of problems with TV dates and stuff that may get in the way of that as well. And plus, man, all of these changes of rules, I've yet to know any changes of rules that really have been helping fighters out or helping fight fans out. It usually just creates more opportunity for promoters or fighters that don't want to fight people to kind of skirt the rules and make it work for themselves anyway. But I gotta say, man, I think it's a little bit ridiculous to call for Errol Spence Jr. to be stripped. Also, but JERMALL Charlo, I can understand the argument. However, he's got a fight date. He does have a fight date that they in June, I do believe he's going to be fighting Selecki. So, hopefully we'll get these things done. But anyway, you just let me know what you think in the comment section. And with that, I'm out. Peace.